Really?
That's fine.
Okay. How did that happen? Oh, well. Apologies. All right. Maybe we start with you guys introducing yourselves, because you are so much better at doing that than I am. So maybe we'll start with you automatically.
First of all, good morning. It's such a pleasure with you today amongst the change makers. I don't know if the microphone is working.
It is,
yes,
yeah.
It is, okay. So I work for the Ellen McArthur Foundation as a senior policy officer. I focus mainly on plastics and packaging as part of the policy and institutions team. At the Ellen McArthur Foundation, we work together with businesses, governments, academia, NGOs, and many others in order to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. The circular economy we envision is built on key three principles. It's eliminating waste and pollution by design, circulating materials and products at their highest value possible, and regenerating nature. In this context, we have had several publications that we looked into in terms of packaging and plastics. We focused on reuse. We also in the global commitment, which represents around 20% of the global plastics value chain together with UNEP.
Well, I've called you Christine before. I'm so sorry, Gilles.
No, that's fine. I'm actually replacing my colleague Christine, who is unfortunately sick. So my name is Gilles Tisserand. I work for Tetra Pak as the Vice President Climate, Nature, Water, Product Sustainability. So there's actually three reasons why we are here today. First of all, of course, I will talk about what Tetra Pak does when it comes to recycling. I think you know that a player in the world of packaging, but packaging for food. That's the second reason why I wanted to be here today on that stage. Tetra Pak is more than packaging. We have lots of solutions upstream when it comes to processing food, transforming food, and actually a lot of the product that we are working on end up in other type of packaging, including reuse. So we are kind of agnostic when it comes to understanding how we need to transform food so that it's safe and available. And the third reason, also, now benefiting from the fact that I'm replacing my colleague Christine, is that on my scope, I look into product sustainability and climate and nature. So I would love also to have, rapidly, I know that it's short, some sort of holistic view on how we need to look into packaging, into the broader view. So what's the climate impact, nature impact of the package, but also what it protects. So I think there's also a point that we need to discuss about the type of packaging and the product that it protects. So that's why I'm here, and welcome everybody.
Yes, I'm very glad to be here, everybody. So my name is Anne-Lucie Verquin, and I'm head of innovation at CITEO. CITEO is a non-profit product responsibility organization. We have to implement what we call the extended producer responsibility scheme in France for household packaging and graphic papers. So it's a little bit barbaric. So to put it simple, every time you buy a product, it comes with a packaging, and industrial companies have to pay a financial contribution, and CITEO takes this financial contribution and uses it to finance the collection, the sorting, and the recycling of packaging. And our mission at CITEO is to reduce the environmental impact of packaging and papers in France. And we work with all the actors in the value chain, so industrial companies, retailers, but also we engaged with citizens to have a good sorting habits. And we also work with local authorities, municipalities, to help them collect, sort, and recycle the waste.
Thank you so much. Let's start with the holistic view, because I like to start panels with that usually. And I'm going to be very upfront, Bahar. Do you agree with the title of the panel? Is it From Recycling to Reusing?
We were just discussing about that before we came on stage. You were not here yet. And we have diverse points of views. Let me put it that way. I think we would change the order. That would have been a wiser approach. Well, having said that, yeah, I think both have a role to play, but we need to definitely accelerate our uptake of reuse systems. And those reusable packaging need to be recyclable at the end of their lives.
There is something you have to say about that.
Well, of course, and actually I would like to come back to as Celia and Fernando presented, because, and by the way, when you look at PPWR, the Packaging Waste Regulation, when you look at the ongoing discussion with the UN Plastic Treaty, which somehow we don't talk about, but it's basically the cup of plastic, which is super important. There are obviously lots of discussion about the 3R and the hierarchy, and at Tetra Pak we strongly support the 3R hierarchy, right? You have to reduce, you have to reuse, you have to recycle. Then there's the whole question about where are the biggest impacts, where you need to start, and where actions can be taken. I think the PPWR, Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, is a good example of what governments need to push, because as, again, we've heard in the morning, to push reuse, you need to have scalability and you need to have the legislative model to support that. It's actually the same case on recycling. Recycling is suboptimal. That's a reality. We've seen the figures, though it's kind of different from a country to another. It's also very different when you look at the different type of materials / type of products. Tetra Pak, I've mentioned, is a company that works on food, to protect food, from the process piece to the packaging piece. And we do work on some sensitive, highly perishable product. So the question is about how we can ensure that reuse can make sense. That's what we do with the process piece. And yet, there's still a strong place for what we call single-use package, which de facto is, yes, single-use, but in that case, we need to ensure that the product is properly designed. So the beginning of the life of the product, the design piece is super important. The collection happens, that's where CITEO comes into the picture, sorting happens, and of course, recycling happens, which we've heard, again, from Fernando and Celia, is very different from a package to another. But I would say it's not reuse versus recycling. We have to improve those 3R. The reduction piece comes a lot through legislation. Reuse and recycling also has to be pushed by that, but I wouldn't say, I think the worst thing that we can do is to oppose reuse and recycling. By the way, we need to design reuse for later on recycling, as Celia mentioned, 50 cycles, 20 cycles. At the end, we also need to think about that.
And Lucy, do you agree it's not a versus, it's an and?
Yes, it's definitely, and so as Celia put it in her introduction, we used to focus on recycling, and at CITEO we've done so since 1992, so since the creation of the extended producer responsibility. But we are faced with serious issues in the world right now, and we came up to the conclusion that recycling was not enough. So now CITEO engages all its stakeholders on 3 Rs, so reduce, reuse, and recycle. So yes, it's not an opposition, but it's an end, definitely.
I see that. My best guess in many cases, it is a lot of it's being recycled that could also be reused at one point, when we look at the final use of the products in themselves. Now, what can business leaders do, you guys believe, or maybe we'll start with you, Bayard, again. What can business leaders do to really identify the quickest wins to maybe make the switch from a mainly recycled dominance kind of product to maybe a reuse kind of situation?
I think what we need is a systems thinking, so really rethinking the packaging, the product, the service that we are trying to provide to the users. And that requires a comprehensive approach, starting with really thinking whether we need it in the first place. So elimination would be the very first approach in it. And actually, through the global commitment that I have mentioned, the signatories have shown that it's possible to eliminate some of the more problematic packaging that can hinder, for example, recyclability and at the end of its use life. And the other thing is reuse. It has to be really a design-in feature, and it cannot be an afterthought. So it has to be a part of the design of the packaging and of the system, because just having the packaging will not be sufficient. And we definitely need reuse systems, because the current leakages are enormous. So it's estimated that around 10 million tons of plastic is entering the ocean every year. More than 160 million tons of plastics already in the ocean, and single use alone cannot solve that problem. So we need also reuse. And then, as mentioned before, recycling then comes because you have to make sure that the packages are designed in a way that they have the recyclability features designed in, and there's also the infrastructure around to collect and to sort and to recycle those packages.
Besides coming to conferences like these, it sometimes is hard for people to understand that there is a full concept to this. So it's not just at the end of the life cycle of the product where we need to look at the product itself, but it starts with the entire design, and that's sort of what you say as well with the system thinking. So what are resources, maybe for you, Anne-Lucie, what are resources that business leaders can use currently to really encompass that in their organizations today?
Well, at CITEO, we embarked on an innovation journey back in 2017. We identify innovative solutions that can bring, innovative solutions through the value chain. So innovation and a mindset, like an entrepreneur mindset, is really an added value, I believe, because entrepreneurs are agile, are quick, and can really make a difference. And I think we are here, change makers on this event shows this as well. And so since 2017, we have accelerated about 70 projects on the whole value chain. And I will not say that innovation is only technology-oriented, but can be. And I will talk about artificial intelligence and how it can, help on the sorting and recycling part of the work. So IA used, because it's a hot topic, this is why I'm talking about it. So IA could help on the sorting side for you consumers. So we have bins, we call them smart bins, that could help you detect if you're doing the right sorting gesture and tell you to put it in the right bin. On collection, you embed IA on collection trucks. That can detect non-recyclables and help local municipalities engage with citizens to have better sorting habits. So a startup like Lixo can do this, and in sorting centers, a startup like Grey Parrots can detect non-conformities, which can lead to serious safety issues, but also detect the different kind of materials, so separates cardboard from plastic, from steel, but also detect the different kind of plastics, and having better sorted materials can lead to a higher quality rate recycled material.
Maybe to the crowd, how many of you, by the show of hands, how many of you consider themselves entrepreneurs? Anybody in the recycling and using space? Amazing. AI-driven? No. I would love to give you a microphone, but we'll probably have... Sorry. Okay, I see. The entrepreneurial spirit that you just talked about, I think, is incredibly important, especially in very established companies as well. It sometimes feels like for innovation to happen, it needs to come from within, and it needs to come from the people who work in the front of it and not really the people who manage top-down kind of situation. Now, at Tetra Pak, how do you manage this innovative side of things, essentially, that you make sure that you are well positioned in this recycling and reusing state?
I like the question because at the end of the day, well, Tetra Pak is being present in 190 countries, so that's pretty much as much as the members of countries part of FIFA. So that's a lot. So we have a responsibility, as I've mentioned, to ensure that our products, from a design perspective, are designed and built with recycling in mind and with low carbon in mind. I also take my climate hat once again. So we have, from the origin, but it has accelerated now 20 years ago, put lots of focus on working ourselves on our design requirements and actually working with the industry and the legislators on setting standards. So that's what I call innovation in regulation, because you have to ensure, and that's the same case on reuse, you have to ensure that you have a model and a setup that maximize, in a way, the design for recycling. two examples that I can give you as well on best practices, not so much in terms of entrepreneurship, but in terms of, well, best practices of good companies. We have made a conscious choice, actually now 7 years ago, to push polymers made from sugarcane origin. And the rationale is that it brings up to minus 40% CO2 reduction. But then the question was, do we go with climate, and does it go against recycling? Well, in that case, we've managed to develop this polyethylene, PE, which fits exactly the criteria and the mechanical properties that we needed for recycling. Okay, so we have managed to make that move from fossil-based plastic to plant-based with the same mechanical properties, minus 40% recycling. Recently, we've put on the market a paper-based barrier, which replaces aluminum for the product that have a long shelf life. And aluminum is great, but it has a high CO2 impact. In certain parts of the world, it's hard to recycle. In Europe, it's pretty okay. But then the question was about how can we replace that, right? And we had originally pushed or tried out a barrier made of plastic, PET, which in the stream that we have for beverage carton was actually impacting the quality of recycling and therefore the value. So it was a no-go for our partner in the recycling value chain. And we eventually decided to move to paper-based because that's where the value is today in the recycling stream. It's with the recycling of the fiber part. So that design thinking was very important because we are making conscious choice of materials, having in mind end of life, and actually I should call it new life, and the climate element. Then let's talk about partnership, and I will actually follow through your value chain approach. Collection, sorting, recycling. Collection, we have to work as a company with the EPR company like CITEO, Eco-Embastes in Spain, Fosplus in Belgium to ensure that people know that they can recycle beverage carton. And this is not necessarily known, and we are seeing typically PPWR pushing to have a depository stand system for plastic and aluminum, and sometimes we forget about beverage carton. So there might be a risk there, and we have to educate, and that's where we are also working with startups. There's an example with Trizi in the CITEO environment with whom we have been working actually now for years to educate consumers, and we put advertising ourselves, we pay our customers to put advertising to tell consumers that they can recycle. AI is something that we are looking into sorting, and we actually are testing solutions in Australia right now with robotic arms so that we can better sort. So we reduce the non-sorted beverage cartons in the sorting centers, and then innovation is also looking into business model when it comes to new life. I've talked about the paper fiber part of the package, which is very well recycled today. If you know brands like Lotus, well, there's a big chance that in France they come from beverage cartons, actually. That's an example, but the polymers and aluminum part is something on which we need to think about the business model. PPWR is pushing even more typically for reuse, transport, packaging, aka pallets and crates. Well, the plastic and aluminum part of the beverage cartons are great materials to make plastic. So we have created partnership with companies like Capca, the #1 reusable pallet producers, and working on business model so that they can reuse the elements of the package. So long answer, sorry for that, but it's a mix of innovation that you have to go through internally from R&D and also the business model piece.
Long answer, but still a very thoughtful one. The last 7 minutes we have, let's spend it on the future. And let's paint a greener picture altogether. So Bahar, we have AI sorting, we have material innovation, we have the corporate entrepreneurship essentially that you guys are doing at Tetra Pak. We have the amazing founders out here who are changing the game. What do you think will fundamentally change essentially about the topic that we're talking about today?
I think it's great that we have many solutions out there. So we have also actually modeled, and we tried to envision a future reuse system in a recent study by the Ellen McArthur Foundation, where we see that the higher the level of collaboration in the system, the higher the level of environmental benefits in terms of greenhouse gas saving emissions, water savings, up to 70% basically. This means collaboration means sharedness of infrastructure, so accessibility to the end users and sharedness by the different businesses around it, as well as some level of harmonization of packaging that helps those benefits to become even more become higher, basically. And also on the economic side, what we see is that the higher the collaboration level for reuse systems, the more competitive it becomes in terms of economical terms for versus single use as well. So we need that level of collaboration, and it's not only between the businesses, it's also with the financial institutions that need to invest into this transition and de-risk the transition, because reuse requires the infrastructure, as also is the case for recycling, but this is relatively new. And we also need the policy, basically, the policymakers to collaborate together with the businesses and financial institutions. And here there are very exciting developments. The UN Plastics Treaty is once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, as we call it, which can really provide the framework for reuse systems, to provide definitions, standards, to provide the incentives to shift for the shift to reuse systems. And we also then have also packaging and packaging waste regulation, but that was discussed a lot in detail. But I think that's a very important step in EU as well to foster that transition, because what happens today is that the reuse is around well below 2%, based on our study with 20% of the packaging value chain. Despite there are pilots in place of about 60% of these businesses, but they remain in silos, and they need that multi-retailer, multi-brand collaboration to make it a reality and to make the reuse revolution a reality, basically.
And Lucy, I have to ask you the same question.
What the future looks like? Well,
yeah.
That's a very tough question, actually.
That's why I'm asking it.
Yes. Well, I think, you know, the future will be maybe a mix of, you know, technology and sobriety. And I think we shall not oppose them. And the future is probably, you know, somewhere in between. And I think we need to project ourselves in this future. And at CITEO, we launched prospective projects on the house of tomorrow or on the future of retailing. To be able to foresee what a new consumer journey will be, what your lives will be. You know, the public space will need to adapt to climate change, to the growth of population, consumption will change. So we are looking into that. We cannot tell right now what the future will be like, but I think it's very exciting to be part of this change. And, you know, we're here, we're all change makers, and I think we all have a role to play in this change. So, you know, let's act together. So if you're interested in the topic, come talk to us.
Gilles, there is one word I think we've said the most in many different versions, and it's the word collaboration. What can people do today to collaborate better?
Yeah, I think it's actually dangerous to have antagonistic approach when it comes to packaging in general. So collaboration is super key. Open mindset is super key, and that's why we need to welcome the reuse associations getting there. We need to welcome the work that packaging associations are going through and push that dialogue like we have today, even if it's only 25 minutes and continuing, I would say, to build upon. To me, what matters, again, if I can answer on what the future would look like, I think the future needs collaboration, and it needs to happen through legislators, associations, consumers, retailers, industrials. So it's a big, big value chain. If I can talk about food packaging, we don't want food to be wasted, and there are challenges across that value chain, and we need to make life easy for consumers. And that's where the innovation comes with, as we have discussed today, and reuse is part of the solutions, and choosing recyclable package with low carbon is also part of the solution.
This is a hard one because we have 2 more minutes left, right? Closing notes. In the end, 2%, you said, 2%, right? Only 2% of products are currently reused. But that's probably not all that can be reused. So for us to push forward to the agenda, for us to be, let's say, more efficient in what you do in order to understand what can we recycle, should we recycle, what can we reuse, and should we reuse, it needs A, collaboration, you said it, innovation on both the material end and the digital end. Then policy and makers need to be back on board with us to make sure that we push or, let's say, incentivize the right business practices. And then in the end, and above all of that, it's a mindset thing. And the mindset thing is really easy to achieve when you sit in a big crowd and you listen to one thing and you agree and you go, yes, that's the one. So maybe for the last minute, I invite you all, take that mindset that we have now gotten, thanks to you, the three of you, take it outside. Inspire others. And when we come back in a couple of years, this stage is going to be huge. Policymakers, innovators, they're all going to be sitting here and going to say, you know what? We're glad we came here. And with that, I've wasted enough time to finally do the closing notes. Thank you so, so much.